Beginning, I was an employee, but I happened to own the company. Then I went to an operator when I was like in the hub and spoke model and figured that out. Then I became an owner when I really built the team that managed the work. And then I feel like my latest transition has been into being an investor who understands the market and then is putting incremental capital and resources against opportunities that we see in the market.
Hello and welcome to Confessions of a B2B Entrepreneur. And today we have a big episode. We have Alan Pentz, who's been a client of Fame, the sponsor of this podcast, for a while. And he has a business called Corner Alliance, which is a management consulting firm that focuses on governments. He's aiming for or shooting for $30 to $35 million in revenue this year. And he owns, I believe, the majority of the company. He started the company 10 to 15 years ago. And he's been through this whole journey of getting past 1 million, getting past 5 million, getting past 10 million, getting past 20 million. And so what we discuss in this episode today, which incidentally was a Twitter Spaces, so the audio during the recording may not be as good as you're used to. We go through each of those milestones or black holes, the 1 million, the 5 to 10, the 20 million. And we understand what the challenges were for him running this people business. And then also what his role was and what he did during those times. So if you are a entrepreneur, a B2B entrepreneur, and you are looking to grow a business from 0 to 1 million to 5 million, 10 million and beyond, then I think this is going to be super useful. It's been super useful for me. Alan has been kind enough to give me some of his time to mentor or instruct me on how to also move through these barriers. So I think it's going to be super valuable. So shout out to Fame for producing this. And then let's jump into this discussion with Alan now. Alan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Tom. Appreciate it.
Excited about this because we're going to uncover the challenges and your role as you built this company, Corner Alliance, for anyone listening and is wondering, that you've over 20 million now, I believe. I think you do share the revenue numbers.
I think we're projecting 35 million this year.
That's incredible. And it is completely bootstrapped?
Completely bootstrapped, yep, 100%.
And it's been about 10 years?
That's a little longer than that. So I actually started in the end of 2007, but really I'd say the first 4 or 5 years of the company. So it's in this weird space of government consulting, which is a whole economy in and of itself. So I'd been working in that industry for another company, which was subsequently bought. And through a bunch of other stuff, kind of got an opportunity to jump out with a former client. I started it with a partner. But really, for our first 4 or 5 years, we were really just consultants who happened to own the company that employed us. I was probably 85, 90% billable. So I wouldn't say like at the beginning, it was a real business. It was a vehicle to do consulting work as a practitioner, not as a business owner. So it's probably 10, 11 years since we got serious about growing.
Makes sense. And so what I want to do here, something a little bit different, is I want to take the revenue kind of, not barriers, but revenue levels from 0 to 1 million, from 1 to 10, from 10 to 20, and then 20 plus. And then I just want to go through the challenges you faced and your role in the company during that time. And so we'll start off with 0 to 1. And I think we may have covered it already. When you had yourself and your partner and you were just consulting 90% billable, did that get you up to the 1 million barrier?
Not quite close. Yeah, like I say, if you work in an industry, particularly professional services, I think that first million, well, it's not easy. It's the easiest barrier you're going to face because so much of it can be your own labor, trading dollars for hours or however you do it. And the way that works best, I feel like, is when you happen to be probably like a more senior person at a company, you go out on your own, you're probably going back out working for a customer at a rate that's much lower than they would have paid at the big company. So you're sort of subsidizing your own labor. So that first 0 to 1 million, I think the 0 to 500K is probably pretty easy. To 1 million, I wouldn't say it's 100% easy, but especially with a partner billing too. It was really just that, maybe like a little bit of junior person. So to me, that's all about leveraging your network and going to the customers that you already have relationships with and trying to build like the core of the business off of that. So I really think like if you have experience in an industry, that should be a barrier you can get to relatively easily just kind of doing what you used to do. And it's really over $1 million that things start changing.
But you wouldn't call that person necessarily an entrepreneur in the 0 to 1 million journey.
Look, we can call ourselves what we like, but I would say that you have a job, you just happen to employ yourself at that point. And I love those people. I coach them all the time and try to get them over $1 million. But I would call that being really an employee at that point, in essence, because there's not any business to manage. It's just you doing your thing. So I don't really call that. I mean, it is a business technically, but I don't really call that like a real business. Correct.
And I seem to remember there were some challenges you had that made you realize that you needed to become an entrepreneur, something to do with the cash flow hole. Was that at the 1 million mark?
That was a little later. So what I found is like going above $1 million, the real struggle there is usually bootstrapping. You don't have a set sales process and you kind of start running out of your network maybe around that. Maybe it's 2 million, can be a little bit different for different people. And if you start running out of that network, you then have to go sell in a more traditional way. You got to go find new prospects. So the problem is you're 90% billable, 95% billable. You're doing the work, right? So how do you get time to go sell? In our case, we were a little lucky that we had some clients that had adjacent clients that it was very easy to meet through the course of our work. We had some clients get more money. They wanted us to do more work. That's a way to grow. But it's a real challenge at that point to get the time to go out and do a bunch of work to build new business. And that work is long-term. It doesn't produce cash right away. So it always is a trade-off. You're sitting there looking at, hey, I got this work today that's bringing in cash at the end of the month. And then I got this amorphous like sales process that might produce something in a year. I think a lot of owners get caught in this trap where they're too busy just keeping the day-to-day going at $1 million or a couple million. In our case, we were able to, after multiple years of just kind of being there and picking up some work, we got to about 3 something, I think, where we had started employing some other people. Our clients, as I said, got more work and got more money. And so they gave us more work. So we didn't do anything great on the sales process. We just got it by being around. So we solved that. How do we get past just by length of tenure, right? And as a result, we built no systems in the company. And so getting up to that 3 to 4 million, we were also able to hire people we had already worked with from other companies. So we didn't even really have a hiring process. We didn't have a management process because everyone had worked together before. We already knew what we were doing. And we just kind of using the management process of the other companies we'd worked for. I say at that point, I was 90% billable. I didn't even know how to get in our bank account. We had a back office person who didn't really know what she was doing. It was kind of a disaster. There was no cash. There was never any cash. I could never understand it. That's when I came up with my line that cash is like a waiter in a New York restaurant. You know, they're there, but you can't get your hands on them. And then basically what happened is we went into a meeting with our accountants at the end of the year and they said, hey, congratulations, you made all this money with all these people. And we had finally hired someone to come in and help put a little order in the back office to do projections, finances, and that kind of thing. So we went into a meeting feeling really good after our accounting meeting. We went into a meeting with her and she's like, and you're going to start losing money in January. This is like,
and just to clarify, this was around the 3 to 4 million mark, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this is what Greg Crabtree calls the $3 to $5 million black hole of business, right? The first one. So we were dead straight in it. We had nothing supporting any of the stuff. We had no management beyond us. And so like as a result, we weren't doing projections. So like some work had got cut back. I think we were probably ignoring the reality of what was coming. If you'd probably asked me at the time, I knew something, but I didn't really understand it. And so we started losing money and we kept the people on. We didn't have enough work to cover all the salaries, but we kept the people on. We started putting money on our line of credit. And at the time, looking back on it, it wasn't that crazy an amount of money, but at the time it was a lot. I had a young family, 3 kids. And my wife wasn't working. And so it was stressful and had a lot of sleepless nights. So I had a lot of time. And I started going around trying to find someone who knew how to fix this problem. And keep in mind, I had an MBA from a top 20 program here in the United States, and I had no idea what to do, right? So Yeah, the MBA is useless for running a small company. Like I knew what net present value meant, and that wasn't going to get me out of anything. So one of those nights on YouTube, I found Greg Crabtree, who has a concept called simple numbers. I started watching his lectures about how to measure output of labor, how to measure how efficient your labor is in dollars, and realizing, oh, labor is everything in a business. It's the biggest expense, the biggest investment. So you better measure it, right? And I started realizing, oh, like there's a whole system where you use the numbers to understand what's going on in your business. This is a revelation to me. And just to go back a little bit, like look at that accountant, what they came in and told us. They told us nothing, right? They were telling us how to pay our taxes. And they're like, hey, you did a great job. And no vision or idea that we were about to go off a cliff. So accounting, it's a necessary thing, but it is not going to help you run your business. Accounting is an input to finance. It's just going to help you run your business. So I started getting serious about really managing the company. And we were lucky. We got some work. Another client near us in our area got some funding from Congress, and they needed somebody to help them run a grant program. And we were there and we teamed with the right people, and we won that work, and it got us out of that money losing situation. But I walked away like, this is just going to happen again if we don't do different stuff. And so I ended up hiring Greg's firm, worked with them for 12 years now or something like that. And then I became a real student of small business. So like to me, what I learned is like, hey, we're right in the middle of this black hole at 4 to 5 million, 3 to 5 million. And that black hole is all about you grew the company based on your network. You were able to find a way to grow it past that, but you haven't done anything to build it as a professional organization. You don't have processes. You don't have any management. Like at that point, everything was hub and spoke. My partner and I were the hubs and everybody else was the spoke, and everything had to go through us, and we were billable, didn't have time. So that model completely broke down. And it was at that point, like about 4 million, 5 million, that we had to hire management, serious professional people who weren't necessarily billable. We also had to bring down our own billability. That's a really scary thing because you're taking on a lot of costs that you have to cover with work. And if you don't do it right, you hire the wrong management, you piss off your clients because you reduce your time, all that kind of stuff, you can go right back down. And often companies will go in this 2, 3 to 5 million. Something bad will happen. It'll go back down. But there's no other way than to start professionalizing your business, bring in real management, and start looking at the processes to turn them into, to get your company running on processes. So that's sort of like that first big black hole that we went through probably 10 years ago or something like that.
And just to confirm, roughly how many people were in the business at that time?
So we were about 4 or 5 million. So I would say it's about 5 people per million. We were about 20, something like that.
And just for somebody in the audience that isn't like clear on what you guys actually do, you do people like big projects for government agencies.
Yeah. The government recently wanted to they passed a bill to give money for semiconductor research and building fabrication facilities in the United States, big $50+ billion program. So they need people, they give that to an organization in the government that doesn't really have the staff to run it. So they hire contracting firms like ours who have expertise on how there's so many regulations that you have to go through NEPA, you have to go through this historic, blah, 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 blah. Go publish in the Federal Register, do this, do that, these compliance things. So they hire companies with experts on that, like us. It's a management consulting business.
Makes sense. And so you would say that to get through this black hole of 3 to 5 million, it's processes and it's management.
Right. And I would say what you're saying is at below 1 million, you shouldn't focus at all on processes, in my opinion, because the owner is basically involved in everything. And you don't need to document what the owner's doing at that point. It's not really important. You should be selling, right? Look, you could document it and that would be good, but it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is figuring out how to get past your network and sell more. But once you get up to like 3 to 5 million, as I said, the owner is the hub and spoke, right? He's the hub with all these spokes coming at him or her. At that point, that breaks down. So now you got to build processes that help other people, train them, guide them, and how to do stuff the way the owner would. So at that point, it's absolutely essential to start documenting and improving processes. So my line at that point was process over heroics, right? So we were getting through everything through heroics. And it's taxing, it's inefficient, it burns everybody out. It's super stressful. So like you go lose money and then you get like a Hail Mary contract that comes through and saves your ass. That's not great. Yeah. So process. And then, yeah, you're going to have to, before 5 million, I think, you're going to have to make that first real management hire of somebody who can do something without being a spoke directly to the owner. Obviously, the owner still overall everything, but you need a senior management person who can kind of make calls on their own and operate independently mostly. And that's a big investment, right?
Got it. Okay. So we've implemented processes and management. We're at around the 5 million mark. So I assume you start growing towards 10. And is it plain sailing up and beyond 10?
Well, it's never peaceful, but yeah, I mean, I think you're kind of building off of the people who get past 5 tend to get, if they've done it right, tend to get momentum at that point. So they figured out how to sell beyond their network. They've brought in some management. There's some basic processes there. They can hire. So they do tend to pick up momentum at that point and hurdle toward 10 to 15 million. And now I would say the range of when things happen kind of gets a little wider here. The confidence interval expands as what revenue level, because like we were at that level and we would win like a $3 million contract. And so that would put us in a different place than somebody else who's working on 100K or 50K gigs, right? But around that 10 to 15, that's where I felt the next black hole. We got stuck around 10 for 4 years in a row, maybe.
4 years?
Yeah. I mean, we were up at 12, down at 9. Thank God we focused on finances, so we were very profitable. So it wasn't a terrible thing. But yeah, I mean, it was really frustrating. We'd win work, we'd lose some work. And what I realized that 10 to 15, there's a lot less documentation, by the way, at this point. Because lots of companies, I mean, not lots of companies, they say like 4% of companies ever get above 1 million. So you just got a lot of solo proprietorships and stuff like that are never going to grow. But very few companies get past 5, right? Almost none. And then you got a lot of literature and business school and stuff about big companies, but there's very little about this like lower mid-market. What I kind of discovered is like, oh, I'm experiencing another black hole. And what I realized was happening was that you bring on some management at 5 million and they're great and all, but as you hurdle to 10 to 15, the challenges get exponentially larger. And the problem is the company can grow a lot faster than the people managing it. So myself included, I didn't know how to run a $15 million company. So I was making the wrong moves. And luckily I was in EO and at that point and really focused on learning. So I was able to kind of figure out, oh, what are people at larger companies doing? How do they approach it? I spent a lot of time learning that. But the problem is what I see happening is you go from needing that one manager who can operate independently of the owner to now needing a full leadership team. So now you need probably like somebody running delivery operations, somebody running finance in the back office, someone running, at this point, I needed a salesperson because it really had gotten past my ability. And so you need a leader who's qualified in each one of those seats. And that's a really tough thing to build because you're going to promote people within. I promoted 4 people to be my salesperson before I got somebody that worked out. They were all great people, but they were trying to sell at another level, at the $15 million level. And I'm a good salesperson. I can kind of do stuff, but I had no idea how to sell at that other level. Things were more process-based. There were more steps involved. There was a lot more going on than just like glad handing customers, which is what I was good at. And so like I'm promoting people to do a job I don't even know how to do. And I called it being Darth Vader's admiral. Like it was a great job while it lasted, but you knew you were going to get killed at some point. So I went through a lot of good people that way. And that's terrible. I put them in a bad position because I didn't know what I was doing. That's me not growing, right? Then I realized, oh, like in a place where we're really weak and we don't know what it looks like to be good, we need to go hire someone more experienced, right? And that's tough because you don't even know how to evaluate them. It's really hard. And that's why, look, the answers are, this is hard because most companies don't get through it. And I was able to finally hire a pretty experienced salesperson, a 10 million, 15 million, you've got a little bit more capital. You can afford to pay people that are more experienced. You can't do that at 3 million, 5 million. Yeah. So it took me years just to get the team right. And I say like going from that, what you really focus on going from 5 to 10 to 15, in addition to refining your processes and stuff, is really turning over your leadership team. And most of the people aren't going to make it. Now, a few are able to learn and they're able to roll with the punches, but a lot of them aren't. And promoting from within works in a lot of cases, but it does not work where you don't even know what you're doing. And so you need to start bringing in some more experience. Like if you're terrible at hiring, promoting someone to be your recruiter is a terrible idea, right? Go get it somebody who knows how to recruit and can build that system. And what you're really doing is you're asking leaders to come in and start building systems inside your business. And that's really the challenge that I saw getting past 10 to 15.
Got it. And I just want to dive into a concept that you actually introduced me to, which is the different levels of work. So I think what you're saying there is to get up to 10, 15, you need to bring in leaders that can do the level 3 work, I think, which is like defining what work needs to be done. Is that correct?
Yeah. So what you're referring to Tom Foster, who's referring to, I think it was, I can't remember the name of the guy who came up with the concept, but the idea is work complexity is sort of associated with the time, he calls it time span. So like how long can somebody work independently without having to check back in with a manager? And he sees like this, like a strata of work going up like mountain formation. And at the bottom are people who are kind of just like production. They just do stuff. You give them a task, they go do it, they come back, say, is this right? Yes. Then give them another task. And so like your basic production workers, or in our case, they would be like associate consultants or new. They kind of work on a very short time frame and they're always checking in with managers. And then strata 2, that's strata 1, strata 2 is the people who manage those people, right? So they're more concerned about architecting a bunch of different production workers. That would be like you're a project manager or like a deputy project manager. And then when you get to strata 3, you're really talking about people who are orchestrating a system. And so that might be a function in a company like sales or operations or finance. And they really have to build across multiple managers, right? And turn all of their work into something else. And that, you think about that, I deliver every day. I'm at strata 1. I manage the work of people every day. That's like longer term. We might check in with that person every couple of weeks, once a month. Then at the next level is, hey, I'm managing finance and they're working on long-term projects that might take months or a year, right? And so they're on a much longer time frame. And then at strata 4, they're like a billion strata that he came up with. I don't think they're all relevant, but at 4, you're kind of integrating all the systems. And so what I would say, that's what's happening after 15 million, is you're integrating all the different systems.
And that's your job as the CEO/founder to do level 4 work.
Yeah, I think for a while. And then you can hire someone after that to do the level 4. Because I think level 5, in my mind, I actually can't remember exactly what he said in the work. You should check it out. Tom Foster. He's a guy who looks like a 3M consultant from 1980s, engineer from 1980, but he's on YouTube and it's really good.
We'll link to it in the show notes.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think at strata 5, you're really in it. The owner needs to go out and understand what the market is doing. So all those other strata, yes, you are involved in the market. And when you're integrating all these systems, you're benchmarking, you're looking at what other people are doing, you're conscious of how the market's developing. But you've got to, at that next strata, after you've got all your systems integrating, it's really about, hey, how's the market developing and how can we shape our systems to better fit that market? And that's how you really grow, I think, past 25, 30 million kind of thing. And some of that might be M&A and stuff like that, right?
So then in your specific journey, you broke through the 10, 15 barrier by bringing on people that had experience and could build those systems. And you were out there doing the level 4 or doing the level 5 work. Is that right?
Yeah, first level 4, and then getting each individual system owner like to be the right person. And then what you're really doing at that point is coaching them on them building their own team, similar team underneath that, right, to run their function. And that's sort of like going past 15 up. You're starting to hire in people who work with a finance person and other managers within delivery and operations. So that's like the first stage. And I would say that kind of takes you to around where I got to, like doubling to 30. And then it's really after that, when you get on the trajectory to 50 million plus, which our target is in 5 years to be at 80 million, you've really got to understand the market. Because when you're smaller, you're growing $1 million every couple of years, or $2, $3, $4 million. And you can live within a section of the market that you understand intuitively just because you work in it all the time. But when you start getting up above 30 and you're hurtling toward 50 or 80 million, you're really talking about taking big chunks of the market. I mean, obviously there's levels of that, right? People at billions are talking even more. But you really need to understand that market. It's usually beyond the scope of what you're working on right now. It's adjacent to that or near it, but it's levels of things that are like, now for me, I need to know what's happening at a meta level with the government contracting industry, where the government is trying to push the industry, where money is flowing in the system. Before it was like, hey, our clients got more money. Isn't that great? Now it's like Congress is starting to really emphasize, or the administration really is starting to look at AI, and they're going to start making investments there. So how do we get in front of that market dynamic and who's really moving and who's not? So you really gotta, and then you gotta look at like M&A. Who are the other players? How do I add capability that I really need faster than you do the buy versus build kind of thing? So that's where I think the owner really has to go at a certain point. I've chosen to actually go. I recently brought on a president, so I'm much less day-to-day than I used to be. Some CEOs stay very operational in that process, and that's fine too. But I think from my perspective, I felt like it was important to go from being that owner, really at the beginning, like let's go through the phase, right? At the beginning, I was an employee that I owned, but I happened to own the company. Then I went to an operator when I was like in the hub and spoke model and figured that out. Then I became an owner when I really built the team that managed the work. And then I feel like my latest transition has been into being an investor who understands the market and then is putting incremental capital and resources against opportunities that we see in the market.
Got it. There's a book called Outsiders where an author, so I think they call it capital allocation in that book.
Right. 100%. And so I think capital allocation becomes the responsibility of the CEO, owner, after you've got your team built and you know what you're doing. It's about people and capital allocation. And one of the points that I think Buffett makes in the book, or outside, he's made it before, is that one of the problems is you don't get promoted for your capital allocation skills to CEO. You get promoted because you're really good at sales, or you're an awesome finance person, or something like that. And then all of a sudden you're sitting in the seat and you've got to make all these decisions about what are you going to actually invest in. And most companies or any organization, I mean, look, I work with the government, I see this every day. They just keep investing in the same shit they've always invested in. And it takes a real leader who understands the market and looks at everything as a portfolio, as an investor, to say, no, we're not going to do that anymore. This is where the world's going. We're going to invest in front of that. And that's a culture change. That means taking people's lunch and giving it to somebody else and probably firing people, that kind of stuff. And like most people just aren't equipped to get there and don't want to do it, to be honest. So I think most CEOs kind of fail at that. And that's why most companies never get to that level. And most of them you sell it to private equity and move on.
So how did you learn to do this? I guess you're still learning, right? But is there any recommendations?
I might just sell out to private equity and move on at some point. So let's not crown me before I'm there. I just think I realize what the challenge is. And look, there's a point at which I tap out too, right? Like if we go past 100 million and we're in it, that's in my industry in particular, that's a totally different kind of space. And you're talking about working a different level with different kinds of customers and like a different level of bureaucracy and compliance. And like, I have no interest in doing that. So like maybe the company will, but I won't. And we'll all need to bring in board and investors and talent that are willing to go. If we want to keep going, we think it's a good thing, that are going to be able to do that. So, and capital partners, right? I mean, at a certain point, you're going to have to engage in M&A in my space. There's just not enough organic growth there. Despite all the money that the government's spending, there's a lot of people eating up that money. So organic gets really tough to build as you go without doing some M&A. So I think that's really where you become almost like a public company CEO at that point, managing all these different stakeholders and players. And once there's investors and a board and blah, 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 I'm not interested in that. So I would not be doing that. But the company might, because the company can grow faster than I can.
Got it. So now the company is relatively self-managing. What are you doing with all your time?
I have turned a lot to coaching. So I do a lot of small business coaching. I started the Small Business Mentor podcast and newsletter. So I'm trying to kind of help people take the journey that I did a little faster than I did and without all the pain along the way. And so some of the pain you're going to have to take, but I can help you go through it faster. So I'm trying to build out a brand there. It's not really a business at this point. I'm not sure if it will be. It's more just like my give back and training. And we started a coaching nonprofit here in DC, coaching companies under $1 million to get over $1 million so they can qualify for EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. That's really what I've been focusing on so far. I'm still CEO of the company. So I am spending time looking at what are the options above this level. So one thing we're doing now with the leadership team, actually, is really interesting, is we're bringing in a series of people who have gone past or gotten to the point of like, as I said, our goal is 80 million in year 5 from now or from the beginning of this year. So we're starting to bring people in who got to 80 million or beyond, most of who exited at some point. We have one that hasn't exited. And we're bringing in a couple of people who are like brokers or iBankers in the space, merchant bankers in your term, who help sell companies. Not that we are going to sell, but we just want to know what the options are. So I'm actually having the leadership team think through what are the next steps of the business with me and not just do it on my own. So spending a lot of time on that, small business mentorship and enjoying life. So going to Italy next week. So I'm enjoying that.
I love that. So if anybody is on this journey or wants to go on the journey, then I highly recommend checking out the Small Business Mentor podcast, the Small Business Mentor newsletter, and Alan on Twitter. They'll all be linked in the show notes. Alan, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your small business wisdom.
I appreciate it, Tom. It was really fun. Look forward to doing it again.
Okay, what do we think, team? Did you understand? Have you been through those levels before? Did this unlock any insights for you? If you have any questions for Alan, I would tweet him at Pentz. Also, definitely check out the Small Business Mentor podcast and the Small Business Mentor newsletter. You can find them if you follow Alan on Twitter. So thanks to Alan for coming on. Thanks to Fame for producing this episode. If you want a show like this, go to fame.so and request a proposal. And of course, thanks to you for listening.